Nigeria needs to do something very quickly and drastically on our present security situation, which is questioning our corporate existence. The great number one job of any government in any society is to provide security of life and property. If you cannot do that, then the government does not exist. If you come to inequality, Nigerian inequality today is the worst. 157 over 157. We're the worst when it comes, if you look at the Oxfam report. In America, 1% of the richest Americans control 37% of their wealth. In China, the richest 1% control 35% of their wealth. In Indonesia, which I'm going to use for example, they control 47%. In Nigeria, the richest 1% control 85% of the wealth. And nobody is working hard. All other countries I mentioned are working hard to lower this. In Nigeria, it's even worsening. And nobody is talking about it. Forbes recently described us as money-losing machine of Africa. Our stock market last year lost 18%. This year, it's lost 13%. Even when it's most shallow of all the countries I'm going to use, for example, within the BRICS country, no country where their stock market valuation is less than 200 billion, except Nigeria. If you look at all of them, Brazil is at almost a trillion. Russia is 575. India is 2 trillion. China is at 6 trillion. South Africa is $875 billion. And its second biggest economy. If you go to Mexico, it's 385. Indonesia is at 450. Nigeria is at 31 billion. And Turkey, the last nation, is at 200. So you have a crisis. Of course, you listen to what the recent seminar by the Sterling Bank, what the chief economist of World Bank said. He said we are living tragically on borrowed time. That's what he said about Nigeria. If you look at all these, you will see, like the previous speakers have said, we are living on a cliff. And we cannot continue with the present economic or political compass, whatever one you call it, which is not pointing in the right direction and would definitely lead to a collapse of this nation. And the earlier we do something, the better for everybody. For my little contribution, because previous speakers have mentioned a few of the things I want to mention, for my little contribution, I will dwell on just on 3 things and then conclude from there. For me, there's 3 things we need to deal with. And issues are: number 1, issue of security. Number 2 is issue of education. And number 3 is issue of the economy, with emphasis in trying to solve our present under and unemployment. It is very critical. For security, I'm not going to make a lot of comments, but just to say that Nigeria needs to do something very quickly and drastically on our present security situation, which is questioning our corporate existence. The great number one job of any government in any society is to provide security of life and property. If you cannot do that, then the government does not exist. And today, what Nigeria needs most is investment from local and from foreign direct investment. But nobody is going to invest in an unsecured place. No matter how profitable it is, the investor has to be alive to enjoy his profits. So there's no need preaching that, oh, it's 20% return, 30% return. I lived in England for a number of years. And I had a partner, very good man. Very good man. I'm sure Professor Ludo knows him very well. Mr. Harding, and he had a fixed deposit in a bank of about £5 million. And I was the chairman of a bank. And I said to him, they were paying him 2%. So it was earning £100,000. And at that time, banks were giving interest of 20-25%. And I went to him and said, Mr. Harding, since you said you're going to give them additional £1 million, why don't you give it to me? So that I can give you maybe 15%, more than they pay for this 5. He said to me, okay, we'll go for dinner and talk about it. And he took me to dinner. And when we finished, he told me, Peter, let me tell you, peace of mind is included in this 2%. You can keep your thoughts. That he has planned his life. That he has planned his life on this 2%. He doesn't want the 15. I can keep the 15. And that is the foreign investor you want to attract. Because he needs to have peace to enjoy his 1% and everything. And that's it. So it is critical that we know we need to provide security. The second thing I need to talk about is the issue of education. It's been repeated by previous speakers and everything. Is just to add. Every empirical studies have shown today that the more you can invest in education, the better your economy and society. Countries that are doing well today are countries that have invested and continue to invest in education. It's as simple as ABC. It's not something you need. So the more you invest in education, the education investment is not an expense. It is an investment. And if you look at all the countries that want to compare us with today, you could see it. Among all the BRICS and mint countries, they all invest at least 4% of their GDP on education. Nigeria, tragically, our budget is low, yet our budget for education is even worse. If you look at all of them, if you talk about the BRICS, you talk about the Brazil, India, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And the mint nations are Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. Of all these 9 countries, only Nigeria, one is that our budget is low, which is a discussion for another day. Only Nigeria is where you find the budget for education below 4%. Is a sorry state that is at below 1%. I'll give you an example. China, today, with a population of 1.4 billion, their annual budget is, of course, they will be mentioned here that their GDP is about 13%, 13 trillion. Their annual budget is 3.8 trillion. Their budget for education is $590 billion. That's what China puts in education every year. More than 4% of their GDP, more than 15% of their budget. Consequently, for UNESCO, China has 95% literacy rate. The other country I'm going to use is Indonesia. Because of want of time, I want to use the best performing country in the BRICS and the best performing in the Mint. It's Indonesia. Indonesia is a country of 260 million people. Their budget is $178 billion, and they spend $40 billion on education. About 4% of their GDP, and over about 20% of their budget. Nigeria, with 200 million people, our budget is 28 billion, which is low. But even worse, our budget for education is $2 billion. It's a crisis. To even illustrate or explain it to you more, let me use a country closer home. It might not be a good example today. South Africa. South Africa But we have to face the reality of where we find ourselves. South Africa is supposed to be the second biggest economy in Africa. The annual budget of South Africa is 4 times our budget. Their budget is 110 billion, ours is 28. What is even worse, their budget for education is $17 billion. In the past 10 years, Nigerian budget for education at the federal level is 4.4 trillion. So our 10 years budget in education is not up to 1 year budget of South Africa in education. And that is where we find ourselves. So we have to face that reality and invest in this critical component. The consequence is that we have 13 million out of school children and everything. Everybody will say to you, where are you going to find the money? Because that's what they always say. When it says, where are you going to find money for education? My question is, tell me any of these countries, any other country in the world that pay what we pay for subsidy of fuel. Tell me any other country. And what is the impact of the subsidy on our economy? In the past 10 years, Nigeria, like I said before, has spent 4.4 trillion on education. Even let me even ask another critical component of development. When you talk about life expectancy, you talk about health, primary health. Our budget for health in the past 10 years is 2.7 trillion. Both of them is just about 7 trillion combined. And that is what we budgeted in the past 10 years. In the same period, we spent about 10 trillion for subsidy. And I can tell you, 75% to 80% of the money that is spent on subsidy is actually, let me not say what happened to the money, but all of you know. It can be better. It's misappropriation. It can be removed. If this money was spent on education and health, education would have received at least 2.5 times what was budgeted. The same thing for health. So instead of having about $15 billion for health, we would have had $37.5 billion. Instead of having $9 billion for health, we would have had 22.5. So education would have had 37.5 and health would have had 22.5. Over that. And if that money was properly utilized, I can tell you it would have impacted better on our economy today, on our per capita today, and to the country. But that money wasn't invested. You can guess what happened to that money. Or even like people say, where are you going to find the money? Recently you saw the report that 1.6 trillion was stolen as an oil theft in 2016. And in 2017, another 1 trillion was stolen. So if you combine these two, it is 2.6 trillion, which is in 2 years, which is the amount you budgeted for health in 10 years. So where are these thieves? Let's all of us go and look for them.